The reason I came to work on Conan the Barbarian was because I had got fired off the film Flash Gordon. The same producers, Dino De Laurentiis, and he had got Nick Rogue, the English director Nick Rogue, to direct a production of Flash Gordon. And I had done an interview with Nick Rogue and got the job as costume designer. Actually, it was a joint costume designer along with James Atchison, both of us. And we started work at Pinewood Studios on Flash Gordon, doing an awful lot of work, both of us drawing all the time. And after about 3 months, Dino said he didn't like what we were doing, but he thought that Nick Rogue's attitude towards Flash Gordon was a bit too arty. He wanted it more comic. And so Nick Rogue got fired, and so we all got fired. So having thought I'd been really, I'd got this is my first big movie, I thought this is going to be terrific, this is it, and suddenly nothing, out of work. And then I got a phone call from Dino De Laurentiis' office saying, would I come for an interview? I said, come for an interview? I've just been sacked by him. What was this? So I was given an address in Park Lane in the West End of London, extremely smart Park Lane, to go and meet and talk with Dino De Laurentiis. So I went in, it was quite intimidating, it's a big room, and he was sitting with his back to a big bay window up on a slight podium, so he was up, and basically a big empty room. You felt like suddenly you were in court. Anyway, he was very nice to me and said, I'm sorry we had to fire you, we loved the work you were doing, and we would like you to do Conan the Barbarian. So suddenly, I'd gone from euphoria of doing Flash Gordon to the despair of being unemployed, and all within a week of suddenly going, can you get on the next plane to Madrid and go and talk to Rafaela De Laurentiis out in Madrid and get started and talking with the director John Milius out there. So I did. So that's how I got the job. I only got the job because I got fired off another one. The only way to do it, really. I knew the name, but I hadn't really looked at the comic. I didn't know I was going to be, it was all happened within 24 hours. So the first time I looked at comics was when I went to Madrid to start getting set up and work out how we were going to do it, and meeting up with Ron Cobb, who was the production designer, and he had several of the comics in his office, and he said, before you even think about it, before you even read the script, look at the comics. They'll help you enormously, which they did. It wasn't just a question of copying what you were seeing, but getting the flavour and understanding the relationships of all the sorts of characters that you might be coming across, and how important good and evil is, and all that sort of stuff that you're going to emphasise in your work. So it was very useful seeing the comics. I started straight away with Conan. It seemed to be the way to go. I just wanted to get my head around actually drawing that body properly and getting the whole feeling about it. And actually then I went on to Max von Sydow, who was playing the old king in that. And I felt I sort of knew my way around making an old king work properly. A couple of years before, I had been doing The Six Wives of Henry VIII for the BBC, which was a big success and was very good for me, and was the whole reason that I was being offered work by people like Dino De Laurentiis because of that. And there was a lot of old kings in that, and I felt at home. So having my first two things were starting on Conan the Barbarian, was starting to draw Conan, to get the whole feeling of the strength and how you portray that strength in the drawing. And the old king. The one balanced the other for me, and that was my start. It's very important when you're doing the drawings that you get the right sort of character, personality, the feeling coming out of it, so that it helps the actor. If you can get it right, it helps the actors enormously to how they are going to think about their character, just looking at a drawing that somebody has really thought hard about. I think lots of actors have said to me they find that very useful in their thoughts about the character they're going to portray. Some of the most difficult work I had to do on Conan the Barbarian was actually Sandal Bergman, who was Conan's sidekick in the film, really. Perhaps I'm not spoiling the story, but she does die and then comes back. To make her look really tough as well, so she go from scene to scene where she slightly varies her character. To get that balance right is quite difficult, going from armour to sitting in a bar looking. And Sandal said to me, thank you very much, you helped me enormously in my feelings about the character and what I was doing. And I think that seriously is the costume designer's job, is to be able to get that dramatic feeling into a personality. A really interesting project for me personally in Conan the Barbarian was the wizard Mako. My son, who was 10, 11 at the time, had come out to stay with us. It was the summer holidays. Anne and I were both working on the film, my wife Anne, and Daniel had come out to stay with us. And I was thinking how I was going to cope with the character Mako, and I wanted to have a very sort of texture and slightly movement of colour about it, but very loose and floppy as well. And I remember during the war, with my mother, when I'd have been about the age of my son at that time, we used to make rag rugs, start with a bit of netting and then just bits of rag, just cutting up bits of rag from anything, from old jumpers or trousers or anything you had, and tying them into the netting and making a rug that you put on the floor. And I thought this is the perfect sort of thing for Mako's costume. So I taught my 10-year-old son how to do it, and we did it together. And really, he picked it up so quickly. He was quicker than I was, tying all these bits of rubbishy material just to get the interesting texture that I needed and the lightness of movement of the net on the Mako character. It made the character. So I had to buy him I think I bought him a book. No, I didn't. I bought him a watch as a present. Yes, as a thank you. So, but he's not credited in the film, my 11-year-old son, no. James Earl Jones, I went to meet him just to talk to him about exactly, because it's so odd, what are you going to do to make this creature come to life? And he was a creature in it. And he was living in New York at the time, and I flew over to New York, as one did in those days, to talk to him. We had a long, and he said, and he was so enthusiastic. He was quite obviously up for anything that we did, I'd got a couple of basics sketches started, but the most difficult costume was during the story he turns into a snake, and how did we do that? This is before the age of computer generation, so really quite difficult to do, and making this snake mask that would slowly grow out. There was camera manipulation, but it's computer generation, so not easy to do. And of the whole film, that costume, that sequence when Tulsa Doom turns into a snake was by far the most difficult thing I had to do. But I think it works. I think it does. You have to watch it and tell me. Whenever I see the film, that's the bit I think, oh, here comes the deer. Oh yes, okay, it's all right, just about. The terrible thing about watching films that you've worked on is the mistakes you've made, the things that might have gone wrong, and every time you watch it, they're always going to come up. It hasn't changed. We shot the movie, Conan the Barbarian, in Spain. We were using what they called the nave, which is Spanish for a warehouse, on the edge of Madrid, which had been converted into ersatz film studios, and actually were very good, perfect. And then the rest of it, we were around in Almeria and down the south, and but anyway, in Spain. And I try hard when I'm working on location not to have to use an interpreter. I was pretty good French speaker, and I thought I can pick up Spanish. And every evening when I had an hour off, I would with a book, just try and teach myself. But I realised that during the day, this is a Dino De Laurentiis production, and Raffaella De Laurentiis, and quite a group of the people that I was working with were actually Italians. So I think by the end of Conan the Barbarian, I was becoming quite an efficient speaker at Español or something, which is a mixture of Italian and Spanish. But I sort of made it. Working with Arnold Schwarzenegger was like being almost like on another planet. I remember right at the beginning, I'd been talking with him, looking at some of the drawings I was doing and talking about what we needed to do and how we were going to portray it. And I remember him saying to me, when we got to the stage of trying to measure, and I was measuring these impressive biceps, all that sort of thing. And he said to me, he said, "John, you have a good body. You want to talk to me, you should come to the gym." "All right, Arnold," I said. So 6 o'clock in the morning, you'd be, just to have a quick chat with Arnold. That's where you had to be. And I've never seen such work in my life. I mean, you realise how they achieve those bodies because it's just real hard work. Sweat leaping out of the forehead, not just running down. And he would work in the gym for like an hour and a half before having to just relax for a few minutes and go to makeup so that he was on the set for 8:30. I mean, real hard work. I couldn't possibly do it, and you've got to have such a mindset to do that. But it was impressive, and I must say, at the end of Conan films, I was probably better shape than I've ever been since or ever before, ever. Conan the Barbarian, for me, it's such a significant marker in my life. It was the first big movie that I had ever done, and taught me so much. Looking back now, when I started it, I was such an ignoramus. How lucky I was to get through it. But actually working with, I actually think, brilliant crew, both in terms of the design and the production. Raffaella and Ron Cobb taught me a lot about how to do it. As I say, I was such an inexperienced person at the time. So I'm full of gratitude, particularly to Raffaella. Thank you.